The quiet suburb. On Maplewood Lane, the world seemed to pause. Wide, tree-lined streets basked in the afternoon sunlight, casting patchy shadows on the well-manicured lawns. Pastel-painted houses stood in neat rows, American flags fluttered beside mailboxes, and bikes tossed carelessly across driveways waited for their young owners to return from school. The quiet hum of weekend mowers or the distant chime of wind bells was the loudest sound one might expect to disrupt the illusion of peace. Michael Turner hadn't chosen Maplewood Lane. More accurately, it was what he could afford after the divorce finalized and the dream house slipped out of reach. The 3-bedroom rental wasn't much, but it was clean, in a decent district and, most importantly, far enough from everything he needed to forget. Each morning when the sun glimmered through white lace curtains, he'd promise himself that this day would be the start of something new. Yet come nightfall, he found himself staring at walls hung with someone else's pictures and counting the quiet beats between bouts of insomnia. If there was one thing Maplewood Lane didn't lack, it was neighborly curiosity. Within days, Mrs. Gallagher from next door brought over a bundt cake and a barrage of gentle questions just to welcome him. The men on the corner, Jim and Al, invited him for beers on the porch. The neighborhood committee chair, Mrs. Kent, sent a typed letter about the block watch and an invitation to join the annual 4th of July picnic. But there was something else, too. An undercurrent Michael couldn't quite name. Small talk at mailboxes turned oddly hushed when he walked by. A cluster of women whispering by the cul-de-sac stopped mid-laugh as his shadow passed over the sidewalk. Maybe it was just that newcomers were rare, he told himself. Maybe it was nothing. Not every house on Maplewood Lane basked in sunshine either. The house 2 doors down, the Ricksons, stood out without meaning to. Its windows stayed shuttered, even on bright afternoons. The grass was neatly trimmed but never landscaped. Michael had heard the neighbors discussing Mr. Rickson once or twice. Odd fellow, works nights, keeps to him. Most evenings, Michael strolled the block in search of peace. But lately, the peace felt fake. He couldn't explain why the air felt heavier, why his heart raced whenever he met Mr. Rickson's unreadable gaze across the hedges, why every ordinary thing seemed colored with a layer of tension he was just now beginning to sense. But Michael kept his head down, at least for now. He'd survived enough upheaval to know when not to draw attention. Still, sometimes, late at night, when he looked out at the silent, perfect street, he caught himself wondering what was really happening behind those locked doors, and why he felt like, somehow, it was only a matter of time before those secrets found him. Signs in the shadows. The first sign, Michael thought, was so ordinary he could have ignored it. A delivery truck idled at the far end of the block while the sky hung bruised with early evening. Michael watched from his kitchen window as a man in a gray hoodie stepped from the passenger side, clutching a heavy-looking box. Instead of walking up the path to the Ricksons' front door, the man took a shortcut around back, glancing quickly over his shoulder. The truck rolled away before Michael could memorize the plates. He told himself it was nothing. Amazon, Grubhub, FedEx, all common in the neighborhood. But the next afternoon he heard it. A sharp, brittle crash echoing from the Ricksons' house, followed by a woman's choked sob. Through the thin walls, Michael almost missed it, and if the wind hadn't shifted, he would have thought it was the television. The sound gnawed at him as he tried to focus on work, spreadsheets blurring before his eyes. Night fell in fits and starts. Michael wandered to his mailbox, nerves jangling, only to find Mrs. Gallagher outside watering her mums. beautiful night," she smiled, "isn't it?" He started to ask if she'd noticed anything at the Rixons, anything odd, but something in her stare told him not to. The words dried on his tongue. Back inside, he tried again to convince himself he was mistaken, that people saw what they wanted to see. Sleep refused him. Michael glimpsed Jessica, the Rixons' teenage daughter, out front, with her head down, phone clutched tight in pale fingers. And then, one humid Friday, another sound. Not a crash, but a scream. Real, raw, and unmistakably terrified. Michael dashed to his front window and caught a brief glimpse, a shadow by the window, something falling, blinds snapping shut. The scream died almost as quickly as it began. His heart hammered. Enough, he decided. Michael dialed 911. His voice trembled as he explained. I think something's wrong next door. The Rixons' house, the neighbors. I heard a scream and—" He faltered, hearing his own uncertainty ring out. On the other end, the dispatcher's tone was brisk. "We've received no other calls regarding that address, sir. And do you have any evidence?" "No, just, I heard—" Michael hated how defensive he sounded. "Can you at least check?" "Someone will drive by," the dispatcher promised, but all Michael saw that night was the familiar, slow crawl of a cruiser rolling past, lights off, not even pausing. The next day, he noticed the shift. Neighbors who once waved now crossed the street. Mrs. Gallagher mumbled something about mind your own business. Jim and Al on the corner kept their distance, beer cans in hand, heads together in quiet conversation. The message was clear. Don't stir trouble. From behind the safety of their blinds, the neighborhood watched Michael the way he watched the Rixons, warily, suspiciously, while Maplewood Lane pretended nothing was wrong at all. But Michael felt certain. Something, somewhere in those shadows, was very wrong indeed. On Maplewood Lane, Michael quickly learned the price of asking questions. Overnight, the convivial smiles that had greeted him weeks ago froze into tight-lipped nods. The lazy, neighborly chatter at dusk evaporated as if someone had snapped off a light switch. He no longer found friendly invitations stuck to his mailbox or the occasional piece of bundt cake wrapped in foil on his doorstep. Instead, a chilly silence set in the neighborhood. "We all look out for each other here. Maybe you'd feel more comfortable if you respected our ways. No more trouble, please." The first time he saw Mr. Rixon after that, they locked eyes for a moment longer than necessary. Mr. Rixon's gaze was unreadable, blandly polite, neither warm nor hostile. But Michael caught an edge in the set of his mouth, the slight curl of a smile that didn't touch his eyes. It made Michael's skin prickle. The real test came the following Saturday during the neighborhood's monthly block cleanup. In months past, Michael had joined in, raking leaves alongside his neighbors, enjoying the easy camaraderie of working hands and shared tools. This time, his offer to help was rebuffed without words. Everyone simply gravitated away. He bent to pick up a stray soda can along the curb. When he straightened, he realized half a dozen neighbors were watching him. Openly this time, faces stony and hard. Someone muttered, "Some folks don't know when to keep to themselves." Laughter, dry and mean, rippled through the group. That evening, Michael stood at his kitchen window, staring out at the Rixons' house. The blinds were snapped shut. Not a flicker of movement showed behind the glass. He wondered what it would take to make people care. He wondered, painfully, if he'd always been this naive. His phone vibrated with a news alert he barely read. A television somewhere nearby spilled canned laughter through thin autumn air. Maplewood Lane marched on, pretending its own sanctity, its own well-kept secrets. Michael sat back, realizing he was now alone, truly alone, drift in a community that wanted him silent, and Mr. Rickson invisible. The chilly wind rattled his kitchen window, and for the first time since moving to Maplewood, Michael doubted he'd ever feel at home there. Not while so many eyes were politely looking the other way, and not while his own were still open. The first clue. Saturday morning brought a heavy mist to Maplewood Lane, softening the sharp edges of fences and hedges. Michael woke earlier than usual, restless, unable to shake the Rickson's property line. He paused. The bins stood silent, unremarkable. One for recycling, one for regular trash. But something caught his eye. A shipping label, barely wedged beneath a broken-down cardboard box halfway exposed in the recycling. He glanced around. No one was outside. Heart hammering louder than the distant call of a blue jay, Michael reached in and slid the label free. It was addressed to R. Rickson, shipped from a warehouse in Newark, New Jersey, with no company name, only a hastily scribbled fragile. More curious was what sat beneath the box. A sealed padded envelope shoved deep inside, with only a portion poking out. Michael could just make out a corner of an official-looking logo and the words, "Confidential, do not distribute." He glanced back at the house, then at the envelope. Quickly, before he could talk himself out of it, Michael snapped a photo on his phone and slid the envelope back as best he could. But the rest of the day, the image nagged at his mind. What was Rickson getting delivered that had to be marked confidential and came from so far away? That evening, Michael returned to his small kitchen table, phone in hand, examining the blurry photo. He zoomed in. Next to the government-style logo, there was a number, maybe a batch or case code, partially scratched out. Later, as darkness crept over the cul-de-sac, a muffled commotion drew Michael to his porch. Two men, not neighbors, stood by the Ricksons' front door, heavy-set and purposeful. Rickson answered. There were no greetings, only a brief, tense exchange and the quick handoff of what looked suspiciously like the padded envelope Michael had seen earlier. He watched as the men left in a low-slung black sedan with out-of-state plates. That night, Michael's thoughts tangled in endless knots. The mysterious deliveries, the odd-looking confidential marking, Rickson's acquaintances, too many questions with no good answers. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events again and again. For the first time since moving to Maplewood, Michael felt a deep, bone-cold fear, a suspicion that something was unraveling just beneath the calm surface. And no matter how much at the Ricksons' house, hunched in a pool of blue shadow, questions nipped at his mind like cold rain. What was in those packages? Why the secrecy? And how far would Mr. Rickson go to keep it hidden? By Wednesday, Michael couldn't take the uncertainty any longer. With trembling hands, he sat at his laptop and typed a search string for discrete home surveillance systems. The number of options, tiny cameras that could hide inside birdhouses, motion-activated recorders no bigger than a thumb, astonished him. He settled on a set of inconspicuous outdoor cameras, paid with a card he rarely used, and scheduled next-day delivery to a friend's address in town. Nothing about Maplewood Lane felt safe anymore. He spent the afternoon learning about video surveillance, poring over tutorials and consumer reviews, taking careful notes. Part of Michael felt foolish, like an overzealous amateur detective, but deeper down, a more urgent voice, one that hadn't spoken since his last year of marriage, prodded him forward. On Thursday, something unexpected happened. As he struggled with the strand of Christmas lights, already preparing for the coming season, hoping to blend in, A soft voice startled him. "Do you need help?" Jessica Rickson, slim and pale, stood at the edge of his walkway. She looked even younger up close, eyes shadowed by exhaustion or perhaps worry. Her arms circled her waist like an invisible shield. He hesitated, surprised. "Sure. If you know how these tangles work, you'll be my savior of the day." Jessica offered a nervous smile and kneeled, careful not to brush the warped hedge between their houses. They picked at the knots in companionable silence. Michael noticed a black-purple bruise blooming along her left forearm. He kept his tone gentle, non-committal. "Are things all right at home?" he asked softly. She didn't answer at first, her hands stilling on the wires. Then, with a glance over her shoulder at her own front door, Jessica whispered, "Don't worry about us." Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. "People who worry here always get burned." The warning stung. Michael wanted to press, to offer help, but a kind of invisible wall hardened around her the moment he even tried. He promised himself, stranger who never stepped out of the shadows. Their exchange was curt and wordless. Hours later, Michael sat hunched over his laptop, screen glow stinging his eyes. He didn't know exactly what he'd captured, not yet, but he felt something beginning to break open. For the first time, Michael understood the true risk he was inviting, but the thought of Jessica's bruises and her warning pulled him forward. There would be no turning back. The truth, Michael realized, was locked away behind more than one kind of door. And if he was careful, maybe, just maybe, he could find the key. Footsteps at midnight. For 2 nights, Michael obsessed over the fuzzy, shadowy footage from his hidden cameras. He replayed every shift and pause, jotting down the times of each mysterious arrival. By Friday, he had a scrawled log: 2 unmarked vans, 3 strangers, 1 briefcase, 4 boxes. Each visit was swift and silent. Each time Mr. Rickson was either present or watching from a sliver of window. Michael's nerves frayed as he pieced together the fragments. He slept fitfully, a pillow over his head, laptop humming by his bedside. Each creak or rattling branch outside sent adrenaline spiking through his chest. Still, he couldn't bring himself to turn off the camera notifications. Each ping was a possibility, a clue he might not notice if he let himself rest. It was well past midnight when he heard footsteps on his porch. Michael bolted upright. The noise was unmistakable. A single footfall, the subtle creak of the loose board by the steps, a pause. It could have been a stray cat or a lost delivery driver, but Michael already knew it wasn't. He killed the lights, heart hammering in his throat. Slowly, he crept to the front door. Through the peephole, only darkness. No movement, no sound. He held his breath, listening as the silence stretched until it pressed cold against his face. Then, a soft knock, almost polite, barely more than the sound of skin on wood. Michael swallowed. Against his better judgment, he opened the door on her wrist. "He makes us keep secrets. He says if we talk, someone will get hurt. But I don't know who to trust anymore." Michael's mind raced. "What's he hiding?" he asked gently. But Jessica only shook her head, tears slipping down her face. "You shouldn't get involved," she whispered. "They're watching you too. Everyone in the neighborhood knows." She drew a crumpled envelope from her pocket. Michael recognized the confidential marking from the trash can. "He left these documents out. I took pictures. I haven't shown anyone." There was a desperate hope in her voice. "Will you help me?" Michael nodded, a decision settling heavy in his bones. The safe thing would be to bow out, to pretend nothing was wrong, to give up. But in that moment, looking at Jessica's frightened face, Michael knew he couldn't. "We'll figure this out," he promised. But even as he spoke, he felt the walls of Maplewood Lane closing in more tightly than ever. Breaking the code. Michael waited until Jessica had calmed enough to speak clearly, then drew the blinds and pushed the living room lamp back behind the faded blue curtain. The stillness in the house was tense, almost brittle, broken only by the faint whir of the refrigerator. Jessica laid her phone on the coffee table between them. Her hands, raw and bitten at the nails, hovered nervously over the screen. "I snapped pictures of everything I could. Documents, emails. Some of it's just numbers and codes. I think it's government stuff. It looked serious." Michael reached for his laptop, motioning for Jessica to take a seat. If he'd once believed this story was about one troubled family, the evidence in front of him now pulled him into something bigger, something dangerous. They began scrolling through her photos. Image after image, lists of serial numbers, page headers marked confidential, department assay, emails that referenced unregistered shipments and third-party arrangements. Some messages were heavily redacted. Others included cryptic sender names and timestamps that meant nothing at first glance. A familiar current of dread flickered through Michael. "These aren't just shipping receipts," he said quietly. This slowed as it passed Michael's house. Jessica shrank away from the window. Michael closed the laptop, choosing caution over curiosity, and beckoned her farther away from view. After a moment, "Look, Jessica, I can't promise you it's safe, but if we turn this over to the police—" "No." Her answer was swift, fierce. "They won't help. The last time Mom tried, someone from Dad's work came instead of an officer. She said they threatened us. Made it clear if we talked again, we'd regret it." Michael's mind raced for another solution. "We need corroboration. Proof these documents connect to specific crimes or someone willing to intervene outside local law enforcement." Jessica looked at the floor, defeated. "Everyone we trust just tells us to keep our heads down. I wish we could trust someone real, Mr. Turner, someone who sees us." Her words lingered after she left through the back door, melting into the shadows as dawn threatened the horizon. For hours, Michael sat in the semi-dark, piecing together codes and names from her photos, cross-referencing anything he could against obscure online databases and news forums. Portions matched news of missing laboratory equipment. Others, worryingly, linked to headlines about illicit chemicals found in anonymous suburban homes just towns away. Each revelation tightened the knot in Michael's stomach. If this was real, if the evidence pointed where he thought it did, the Ricksons, and perhaps even Maplewood Lane itself, were tangled in the roots of something that could explode if exposed too quickly. As the first sunlight spilled across his porch, Michael resolved he had to be careful, had to protect Jessica and her mother, and above all, had to get to the truth without letting anyone, inside or outside, realize just how close he was. He'd started this as an outsider, but now Michael Turner was in the thick of it, and the only way forward was through the secrets everyone else refused to see. Tenuous alliances. The next day dawned brittle and gray, the kind of sky that seemed ready to shatter with bad news. Michael felt the tension as soon as he stepped outside. Eyes followed him from parked cars, behind curtains, through half-open doors. He realized with a sense of dread that Maplewood Lane itself was becoming just as much of a character, recurring like a bad dream. Fear pressed in, but so did something else. A resolve tempered by a dawning understanding. Michael realized he was in over his head, but Jessica's frightened hope and the possibility of others in danger left him no room to turn back. That evening, back at his little house, Michael jumped when the doorbell rang. Jessica and her mother, both pale and jumpy, slipped inside. Mrs. Rickson, a thin woman with darting blue eyes and a tenseness in her shoulders, offered no pleasantries. "Do you have it?" she asked. Michael handed over a thumb drive containing the photos and notes he'd compiled. "Who have you told?" Mrs. Rickson whispered, scanning the room as if new threats could materialize from the baseboards. "No one," Michael said, "but I don't think you're safe. Not here, not now. Is there anyone you trust? Anyone at all?" Jessica clung to her mother as Mrs. Rickson shook her head. "They have people everywhere. He mentioned Redfield," Michael interrupted. "I found that name in the emails. Who is Redfield?" Both women looked at each other, fear etched deep in their faces. Jessica answered, "Dad said Redfield isn't a who, it's a group. People who pay for what can't be bought. People you never see." A silence settled, heavy and mournful. Then Mrs. Rickson's jaw tightened. "We can't leave. He says they'd follow." Michael looked from mother to daughter and realized the only escape would have to be carefully orchestrated. No police, no rash moves. He suggested a safe hotel under a false name, offered to put the cost on his own credit card. They hesitated, then agreed. Michael scrawled the address and instructions on a slip of paper. "Go tonight, after dark," he told them. "Don't pack, just leave. I'll keep collecting evidence. I know someone who might help. Don't ask who yet. I'll call you once you're safe." Jessica squeezed his hand. Hope and fear seemed to balance in her eyes. After they slipped away, Michael shut every curtain and double-checked the locks. He emailed a journalist to echo Michael's nerves. Sleep was impossible. He moved from window to window, checking the shadows outside, listening for the muffled purr of engines or the hurried footfalls of someone slipping through the rain. With each flash of lightning, the familiar shapes of his neighborhood shifted into something strange and menacing. His phone buzzed just after 3 a.m, a message from Jessica. "We're safe. At the hotel. Thank you." Relief washed through Michael, but it was thin and fleeting. He couldn't shake the feeling that danger was still closing in, pressing at the walls. He checked his computer, hoping for word from his journalist friend. Nothing yet. He poured himself coffee with hands that trembled and sat at the kitchen table, mind racing through contingency plans. If the Ricksons were discovered, if Redfield sent someone after him, if the evidence disappeared before the story could break. The rain intensified, drumming wildly against the glass. At 4:30, a car slowed at the curb. Michael killed the lights and watched from the slit in his curtains. 2 men in dark ponchos got out, walked up the Ricksons' driveway, and peered through their living room window. One tried the doorknob. The other circled toward the backyard, head swiveling, searching for any sign of movement. Michael's heart hammered. He grabbed his phone and snapped photos, his hand as steady as he could make it. He considered calling the police, then remembered the Ricksons' warning. Someone from the company might answer instead. A clap of thunder shook the walls. The men did a circuit of the house, then returned to their car. They spoke briefly into the glow of a dashboard-mounted phone before pulling away, their taillights a streak of red through the watery dark. Michael waited, barely breathing, memory replaying Jessica's haunted warning about the neighborhood always watching. When day finally came, Michael ventured out. In the Ricksons' yard, muddy boot prints tracked across the porch and vanished around the corner of the house. The mailman, head ducked against the drizzle, gave him a quick nod but nothing else. Michael noticed the man's nervous glance at the Rickson home. As Michael returned to his house, courage. He'd need allies. He picked up his phone and called his journalist friend. The message went to voicemail, but Michael's voice was steady when he spoke. They know I'm involved. I found documents, photos, and I've got contacts who can corroborate. I'm sending everything to you. If I don't check in by tomorrow, publish the story. Please, people's lives are at stake. As he ended the call and encrypted his files for transfer, thunder rattled the window panes one final time. For the first time since he'd moved to Maplewood Lane, Michael realized he had nothing left to lose. The storm outside was nothing compared to the reckoning he could feel building all around him. And he was ready. Morning arrived sluggish and gray, with Maplewood Lane cloaked in a hush that felt almost funereal. Michael barely slept. Shadows pooled in every corner of the house, and the damp air pressed against him like a warning. Somewhere a dog barked, a sound that seemed to vanish too quickly, as if even the animals knew to be cautious. He sipped bitter coffee, reviewing the encrypted documents a final time before sending them in a password-protected file to his journalist friend, Anna Hart. He double-checked the steps: deletion of originals, wiping the hard drive, using a VPN and burner account for the transfer. Every movement felt like he was tiptoeing across a frozen lake about to crack beneath his feet. Anna replied moments later. Received. Stay out of sight. Breaking story as soon as I confirm your sources. Michael's phone didn't stop buzzing after that. Blocked numbers, texts with no sender information, warnings, veiled threats. He ignored them all. Instead, he packed a duffel with the bare essentials: laptop, charger, a change of clothes, the burner phone Jessica had left for emergencies. Around midday, Michael went to the hotel, using side roads and detours, certain he was being watched. Jessica and her mother were waiting in the shadowed lobby. Their relief at seeing him almost crumpled him with guilt and protectiveness. "We have to move again," he whispered, leading them to a corner table into the gray afternoon, heartsick and hopeful, knowing that dangers multiplied the closer he came to the truth. He left the hotel separately, blending into the drizzling rain, and doubled back to Maplewood Lane one last time. His house stood silent, blinds drawn, no sign of trespass, but every nerve screamed caution. He retrieved his backup drive, one last insurance policy, and checked the security camera feeds. The Ricksons' house was being watched again, two unfamiliar sedans parked at different ends of the block. Michael lingered in the back corner of his yard, sheltered beneath the drooping limbs of an old maple tree, watching as two men, one young, one graying and severe, convened in front of the Ricksons' porch. He snapped a few photos from his vantage point, the camera's shutter muffled by the rain. Suddenly, the older man turned, eyes sweeping the yard, pausing directly on Michael's hiding place. Michael stilled, barely daring to breathe. The man stared for 1, 2, 3 long seconds, then turned away, muttering into his phone. Something in Michael snapped. For weeks he had danced around danger, leaving footprints that were too easy to follow. Now was the time for action. Gritting his teeth, he set off on foot toward downtown, blending with the crowd, phone off, head down. He ducked into an internet cafe and sent the latest evidence, photos of the watchers and their cars, to Anna, then destroyed the burner phone in a nearby trash can. As darkness fell, Michael found a small, cheap motel far out of the city. Lying in bed, he listened to passing traffic and distant thunder. His mind swirled with fragments of the Ricksons' secrets, hallway whispers, and threats scrawled on anonymous paper. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, only that now the world was watching, and the story was ready to break wide open. For the first night in weeks, he let himself hope that the truth, once unleashed, might finally set them all free. The story unleashed. Anna Hart's apartment was a cluttered sanctuary of overlapping deadlines and caffeine dreams. As dusk faded over the city skyline, she chained herself to the codes and shipment numbers. This is the real deal. How are you holding up? Michael's voice was low, ragged. They're still looking for us. The Ricksons are on the move. If this gets out. It will, Anna promised. And once it does, you'll have some daylight. Testimony, affidavits, get them ready. I have allies in federal agencies. I'll push for safe harbor. There was a long silence on the line. Rain pattered on glass in Anna's office, sirens wailing somewhere deep in the city. Anna moved to her window, staring at the city's lights. You did good, Michael, she murmured. But you need to stay alive. You're no good to anyone dead. He gave a shaky laugh. I'll take that under consideration. An hour later, Anna's breaking report shattered the night. A rapid cascade of headlines, social media outrage, and urgent inquiry request. Suburban crime network linked to stolen government materials, exclusive investigation. Pictures of documents, redacted emails, grainy images of shady men on Maplewood Lane. By dawn, her inbox was overflowing with tips, threats, and desperate questions from local cops and government officials seeking comment. Meanwhile, Michael huddled in a cinder-block motel room, heart thumping as the news alerts flashed across his burner phone. The comments raced, some calling him a hero, others a traitor, some dismissing the whole affair as paranoid fiction. Michael watched as the hashtag Maplewood Conspiracy trended. Anna messaged updates every half hour. By late morning, everything changed. Unmarked cars rolled down his old street. The men who watched the Rickson house vanished. Jessica messaged, I think we're safe. Mom's scared, but relieved. Thank you. Michael wanted to believe it, but paranoia still coiled in his gut. He called Anna one last time. Did we do it? Is it really over? Anna's reply was weary, but resolute. We cracked the shell, she said. The investigation's just beginning, but thanks to you, the cover-up's blown. The people pulling the strings aren't untouchable anymore. Get some rest, Michael. Let the truth do its work. As he lay back on the stiff motel bed, exhaustion flooding over him, Michael violence of the recent past. The Ricksons, tucked away in a safe house outside the city, watched the coverage in silence. Jessica pressed her knees to her chest on the narrow cot, her phone lighting up with texts from classmates, supportive, apologetic, some prying for secrets she could never share. Mrs. Rickson paced, her movements small and restless, never letting herself drift far from the window. A federal agent arrived that afternoon. He was younger than they expected, plain in his dark suit, but his badge was genuine. He handed Mrs. Rickson a burner phone and a government pamphlet on witness protection, his voice measured but not unkind. You did the right thing, he said. We'll move you again soon. It's safest if you keep contact to a minimum. He left them with a polite nod, the door closing softly behind him. For the first time in months, there was no echo of a threat in his wake. Back in the city, Anna Hart found herself the reluctant face of the investigation. Her reports had drawn attention from federal prosecutors, and whistleblowers emerged from the shadows, some eager, some shaking with fear, to add their voices to the unraveling conspiracy. Anna worked around the clock. She fielded calls from major networks, scribbled follow-up questions in her notebook, and recorded tense interviews with city and federal authorities. Between deadlines, she worried about Michael. His messages grew less frequent, his tone taut with exhaustion. One evening, her phone pinged. From Michael. I'm headed away for a while. Thanks for believing. Take care of the story." She read and reread his words. Something in the way he said, "a while," something in the space between the lines left her unsettled. Michael, meanwhile, watched the fallout from a battered roadside diner miles from Maplewood Lane. He sipped bad coffee, blending into the background as the TV above the counter replayed Anna's footage. In another life, he might have felt proud. But the shift inside himself, the constant vigilance, the weight of secrets, had changed him. The price of the truth was a kind of exile, but it was the only safe lane. Dawn came as it always did, slow and golden, washing over empty sidewalks, silent houses, the ghosts of secrets now brought into the sun.